to capital planning. It is 7:07 p.m. on the 28th, and I'm going to call us to order. I'm going to start with this lovely thing from the cable. So I have to inform you that open session public meetings are subject to being recorded. Our image and voice may be recorded, just so you guys are aware.
I'm Seth.
Seth?
Yes.
Do you have a last name?
Porter.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Eloise is our clerk, so she's very intent. So as far as I'm aware, we don't have any mail. We don't have any old issues at this time, as far as I'm aware. Pegstone
Did you look in the mailbox?
I did.
Oh.
Huh.
We don't have any mail that seems to be different from last week, which was not... Should I go look again?
No.
Okay. Yeah, no, we just have, as far as I'm aware, we have no mail. I'll double check. And the only thing we're sort of waiting on information about is more ARPA funding stuff. And as far as I'm aware, that's still just sitting out in the Ethernet. So the only thing we have today is to talk about Tim.
Okay.
And your fantastic email regarding electronic stuff, which I know nothing about. So I'm curious to hear, I don't know, your experience, like what qualifies you to, and I'm not suggesting you're unqualified. I just don't know anything about your background.
She just wants it on camera.
That's fine. My name is Tim Wysocki. I live at 133 Derby Road here in Berlin. I've been a radio frequency engineer for the last 28 years.
Awesome.
I work for a major telecom, AT&T. I've spent all of that time doing network performance and design engineering of cellular networks and radio networks in general. I'm currently the technical lead on AT&T's network engineering and operations team, responsible for the FirstNet contract.
Great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we need.
Exactly. And now that I know that, we will call you again someday.
Okay.
So, yeah, the public safety presented us with their theoretical proposal regarding updating the system.
Yes.
And you had some very intriguing comments about that.
Yeah, so Eloise asked me to watch your, May 19th meeting, and I did listen to, I think, all but the last 2 or 3 minutes of the presentation that was given at the time. There was a few things that caught my eye and ear that I wanted to address and at least speak to you about. 2 major pieces of it that I was concerned about was the perceived lack of maintenance on the system that exists today,
Yes.
and the use of a private fiber network to build potentially a new one. A third piece of it was a proposal to build a new facility in South Berlin by the River Run area, which again is a major undertaking, and I wanted to make sure that I got on record on some of my thoughts on there.
Absolutely.
So the first piece that I detected right away was I was very concerned about system interoperability. The presenter did speak to it, the chiefs did speak to it, but I'd like to know more about what is being done regionally through agencies like the Massachusetts State Police. Their radio team is fantastic, incredible professionals, and they are a resource for public safety across the Commonwealth. I was curious whether CMRPC, Central Massachusetts Planning, Central Massachusetts
CMRCP.
Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission,
Yes.
was involved in this because they can broker some of these conversations. I know the chief did say that there was something going on between the things. So I was interested in knowing more about that because I didn't feel like it was a good move on the town's part to work in isolation. We rely on these communities for mutual aid, and one of the things that was learned in the 9/11 Commission hearings was that there was a lot of lives lost on September 11th because police, fire, and transit authority and all the different things couldn't communicate with each other when the towers came down. So I want to make sure that whatever is done, that these can be done, that there's an interoperable system. Also, there are strength in numbers. So I was curious if other towns are doing this upgrade, whether we can piggyback on them or be able to take advantage of some of their buying capability so that we can leverage our dollars to go further if we have a larger contract with somebody. I also think that by doing a common network or something that is more regionalized, there's operational benefits associated with this. One of the hallmarks of keeping a network alive is having electronic spares, having the ability to use it, common testing. So if something breaks, I would not want Berlin to be on their own. It would be really nice that if we could just call up whoever's providing the same system to, say, West Boylston, and they could loan us a spare and get us up and running. That goes to the survivability that was discussed in the meeting. So I don't know if that's possible, but it's certainly something that I think we should consider. The maintenance piece. I was not happy to hear what I heard about the maintenance piece.
Especially considering we pay for maintenance.
That's even worse.
Right.
I was not aware of that. What they described to me, what I observed from the meeting, was that the network is virtually non-functional at this point. The antennas lines, which are the coaxial cable that go from the antenna to the base station, are probably full of water, are certainly corroded, and have experienced a dramatic degradation in what they can do. So that happens over the course of many years, and to let it go that far is unfortunate because it ultimately drives the cost of repairing it up.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure that no matter what we do, we are looking at the means of supporting this network in the future, and that we have the dollars allocated to take care of the emergencies when they come up, because this is a public safety grade network, or it should be, and that requires that you put some financial backing behind it to make sure it's survivable. The water in the lines, I'm going to stick with that because it's a personal pet peeve. That's something that should have been caught in routine diagnostics. It's part of what I would expect to see from a service, that they are disconnecting those lines in an outage situation, they are sweeping them, and they are looking for, it's called return loss, which is power going back, being reflected back. It's an indication of the health of the systems. Very, very reliable in detecting faults. If that wasn't done, or if they knew there was a problem, I'd have to ask, well, if you knew there was a problem, why was it not addressed, and how did it continue to degrade? Back on the whole thing. They talked about heating and cooling of the systems. What was described to me, the cabinetry that is housing the equipment is inadequate for the job. It is not weatherproof. To have batteries actually leaching corrosive chemicals to the point where it's degrading the electronic backplane or the connections of there has gone a long ways. That means that you've been outgassing very, very toxic and corrosive chemicals for quite a while. To not be climate controlled, the presenter accurately said that degrades your battery life tremendously. Batteries are consumables. The impression I got is that these batteries were installed and then never changed. Again, speaking to the lack of maintenance on these. Batteries need regular care and feeding, otherwise they become what was described essentially like a capacitor that they only provide a short period of time of survivability. I heard that you guys gave a green light to make some fundamental repairs, or at least subject to additional approval by the select board and others. I thought that was a good move. I think that getting the antenna system up to usable levels will provide immediate benefits to public safety and the DPW.
Can I ask a dumb question?
Shoot.
How come these antennas only affected public safety? Why didn't they affect, like, Nextel and AT&T?
Because it's point to point. You plug one in your cabinet and you plug the other end in the antenna, and it's dedicated to that use. I don't know this, and I have to be very careful because, one, I am an AT&T employee, and I don't speak for AT&T. I have to make that extraordinarily clear. But it is possible that these systems do affect one another. There's something called passive intermodulation, which is creating spurious signals or signals outside their license bands that could affect the other tenants on the tower. I don't know that they are. I haven't done any research to that effect, but the possibility
No,
does
I was
exist.
just curious,
Well,
because
these
I know,
antennas are dedicated just
Yes.
for public versus yours.
Yes.
Yeah.
In this particular system, it sounds like there are two, if I recall correctly, that are dedicated to Berlin's use. To compare that to a cellular system, there will be, if it's a 3-sector system, so they have panels that are pointing in cardinal directions on the compass. Usually 30 degrees, 150 and 270 is very common here in New England. They will have on the excess of 12 or more of these antenna paths, we call them, because a physical box may have 2 of them in there,
Right.
for example. Okay, so that's one of the reasons why cellular is more resilient in that, because they simply have more ways to cope with things. If you have one antenna, one connection, and you're putting them together at the base station, if something goes wrong, you have no failover path. There's no way.
is that why they strongly suggest that you form a loop?
So the loop that they were talking about has more to do with the fiber network that they were talking about.
Oh, okay.
What would be suggested to care for antennas like this is properly sealing them, properly. How you connect them up is you will mount the antenna. You have a connector at the base that you screw in there. They usually have some kind of sealant or waterproofing
A
that goes in there.
silicone, yeah.
Silicone, exactly. And then it's wrapped, usually with electrical tape. It's wrapped again with a waterproof membrane on the outside of it, which functions as a impermeable membrane. That is to keep water from slipping down between theirs, getting in the cracks, and functionally rusting the connections.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So that's that's the gist of the antenna piece of that. So, talking about the loop you mentioned, okay, when you're building a fiber optic network or any telecommunications network that's wireline, you do something called a ring, and how that works is you will run pairs of fiber or of copper or whatever it is. So if one breaks, you can loop it around and you can effectively do a U-turn and then route it around to a different path and still get to the same point. Okay, that's a survivability technique, but there are limitations to what that can survive. If both of those pairs are on the same telephone pole and a Mack truck hits the telephone pole and takes the telephone pole and shatters the thing, unless you have another route coming in from a different direction, which I didn't see in what you showed me, you're still going to go down. You're not going to be able to survive. So again, I don't have the network diagram of how they're doing this, but that would be something that I would ask. Is there a single point of failure in the system is the question that you want to ask. And if the answer is yes, then the follow-up question is,
Okay.
well, what
What are
can
you
we
gonna
do
do?
to remove that single point of failure, and what cost does it drive? The fiber network is complicated, okay? It's expensive, it's complicated. If it were cheap and easy to build, every person would have fiber to their home, okay? Having said that, it's true, it provides excellent service if it's maintained. And my point is, now we're taking a more complicated network with evidence of the lack of maintenance on the radio network, and we're introducing a new piece into the puzzle here. Everything that the vendor said and everything that the chief said is true about Verizon's end of life of their copper. The quality of that service has definitely degraded over the years. I'm not Verizon, I don't speak to their performance, but I think it's clear that's what's happening here. There are products that have been put in place to replace that particular thing. For example, in our industry, we, AT&T, and being careful not to speak for the corporation again, but we also use Verizon to provide us fiber too. So I would question why we need a private network. I know that these networks that we're discussing carries sensitive information because it is public safety. However, there are many, many public networks who can be secured for communications of this sort. Every single major carrier does business with public safety entities and secures their communications safely. So I'll leave it at that. So I would ask for further research to be done. Is it possible to use a leased product from Verizon or some other competitor? It's possible that, even Charter, even though my personal experience with Charter hasn't been stellar, but they might offer a similar product that could be used for this. We're not talking about tremendous amounts of data that we're passing to function this network. We are not passing full motion video over this kind of system. Maybe we're thinking about it in the future.
So Verizon and AT&T are in this business to set up private networks like that?
Yes,
Oh, they are.
and others,
Oh.
just to be fair, and others.
You said Charter. I mean, Charter was our designated
Mhm.
cable provider.
Correct. Depending on, again, I'm not an expert on their equipment. I hesitate to sound like I'm weaseling, but I have to be very
You have to
clear
be specific. That's
about
fine.
That's
what
okay, yeah.
my limits are. I don't know about this equipment, but many different radio systems, many different telecommunication systems can run on Ethernet that is provided by like business Ethernets. In fact, I think the town may actually use some of that, or at least some of our facilities use.
Because when Charter came in, they put in fiberglass.
Their backbone, or what we call the heavy lifting part of their network, is fiber as well. It's just the connections from their network point of presence to like homes that tends to be the
It's
distribution
coaxial, yeah,
is coaxial. They also mentioned survivability for the backhaul. I think one of the things that should be investigated, and again, I have to be careful, but any wireless provider can provide cellular backup in some cases, and I know that it is fair to say that the cellular companies don't always survive an ice storm or things like that, but that would be your second layer of defense in addition to, so if one went down, you'd have another one. What I would offer for any company that does this, we have resources that exceed the town's in dispatching and effecting a repair. Even if we have a vendor on there, when you compare it to, and I'll use Verizon, which is a competitor of ours, Verizon has thousands of employees right here in Massachusetts. They have hundreds of trucks. They have many, many skilled individuals who can bring up one of these lines. So I think just using large numbers, and
They have the volume.
you have the volume, you have the skills, and if you designate some of these lines as critical infrastructure like public safety would be, then it goes up higher on the repair schedule. So again, I'm not,
I believe we are a Verizon town.
yeah, I think all of Massachusetts is.
No, but they National Grid is one town, the next one is Verizon.
Oh, as far as the polls?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's another piece that I mentioned in my letter. Eloise knows this because she and I went through this when I was on the Energy Committee. We, actually I guess I'm on the Energy Committee again, but anyway. When we did the street lamps, we had to secure the right to place those street lamps on those poles. They are not publicly owned, which is important to note. In this town, as Eloise correctly points out, they are owned by Verizon. They control the rights to place anything on those poles.
I think that's since 1926.
It's been a very
Yeah,
long time.
time.
It's
They
been that way.
negotiated through, because they were the only ones with a telephone.
So I'm not an expert on right-of-way and negotiating that, but I know you at least you have to talk to them. And they're not necessarily going to say, well, just because you're a municipality, we're going to give you a free ride to run this cable. And it's a lengthy and exhaustive process to go through that. It was one of the things that was specifically called out in the proposal that was left to the town of Berlin. And there's a reason for that. It is complicated, difficult, and time-consuming.
So just to,
Mhm.
from my own understanding, we have now 3 modes of communications. One is private, that was proposed,
Mhm.
very expensive. Then you have cable, let's say, charter, can
Mhm.
make connections. You
Mhm.
still need the equipment.
Mhm.
And then it's wireless.
Correct.
What's wrong with wireless? They're very stable. My cell phone never goes down.
Well,
Yeah, I
thank
know.
you.
I don't have one, so.
But if I were to give a hierarchy of stability, wireless is probably the most fragile
Yeah.
compared to a dedicated fiber line.
Yes, yeah.
Having said that, there is a lot of we work very hard to keep those operational, right? So there is I would not say that should be used as a primary transportation link, but I think it is appropriate to consider that as a secondary backup. If you lose both of them, well, maybe
All
one,
bets are off.
all bets are off, and
Yeah.
maybe one will come up before the other one,
Right.
right?
So going over, let's say cable, like Charter provides, the data rates are fast enough for police and you don't need fiber for that, do you?
I don't know what these particular devices need, so I would have to defer that to someone who does. But there are a lot of range, there are many ranges of service available, and I would think that there would be multiple providers that could satisfy what they need.
Okay.
But Charter has won it's a 10-year renewal,
Mm-hmm.
and so far Charter has won it since they started in, 1988?
You're talking about the franchise for Berlin? Yeah. That doesn't preclude other competitors from providing service within the town.
Cool.
It precludes them from providing cable television service, but obviously even Verizon in some parts of Berlin provides their FiOS service, which is a combination of video as well as.
To the best of my knowledge, Berlin doesn't have iOS.
Okay, well, I thought they
Right.
did, so
No, we-
maybe I'm wrong.
Not
I
in-
was
not in our
told when
homes, no.
when I called,
I remember
we
being
weren't
marketed
big
to.
enough. Oh,
It-
yeah,
I
they
remember you
marketed it, but
okay.
we weren't big enough for them
work-
to
to
come
work.
in.
Okay, so maybe.
Maybe they are on the fringes, that I don't know.
But we, and I'm speaking in the industry sense now, we, the wireless telecommunications industry, managed to get Ethernet up mountainsides, so I know it's possible.
Yes, at that point, the thing is cost.
It is costs. One of the things that they mentioned, which was actually desirable both by the vendor and the chiefs, was they mentioned microwave or a point-to-point type of communications. That's another even tertiary link that you could look at for additional survivability, if it's feasible. That is something that is true line of sight, and the way that they check that is they actually will go on the towers and they will shine a mirror, and if they can see the mirror on the other end, they kind of know that they got it. That's the not so sophisticated way to do it, but it works.
No, it works in Brookline. I had a 3-hour conversation once with the
Okay.
town manager, and he explained it to me.
Yeah.
He said, Berlin, if you have a lot of trees, it might not work.
It might not.
But with Brookline, they had so many buildings that they could make it work.
Yep. That's a good segue. Let's talk about what they're proposing for a new site, or in my language, a new site built, right? Originally, I know they looked at, I forgot the name, the building that they actually said, but they were talking about putting what we refer to as a stub tower on the roof and basically guying it.
They were talking about either the hotel or over by like where the DCO
Right,
bank is, somewhere in there.
So that's a Pandora's box with doing that. You have to make sure that these don't blow down. You have to make sure that they don't injure anyone. So that requires structural engineering. It requires detailed analysis of the building, and a professional engineer applying their stamp saying that it's A-OK. Okay, so that's additional cost work. I made the point that I don't believe that the town would be necessarily immune from zoning and permitting applications on this. I think that it would be necessary to have public outreach and certainly entertain the concerns of residents who live near these facilities, whether or not that's something they would support. So that is typically a long process. You need to work through the concerns. You need to make sure that you are in the right place. You need to evaluate the zoning district you're in, whether that is what the intentions of the planning board were. So we would also have to do that ourselves. It may be possible to circumvent some of that stuff if we enter into some kind of agreement with one of the buildings down by the circle. That costs money. They're not going to do that for free. And you know, this is an area where I don't get involved. I've spent a lot of times dealing with it, but there's a whole subset of real estate professionals that handle this particular line of work. So that would be something that, if it was in the budget, I would recommend getting a professional to evaluate that area. And then, again, you know, there was a comment that I flinched a little bit at when I heard it, but you know, we can just get the DPW out and have them pour a foundation and we're good to go. No, I'm sorry, that's not how this works. When you're dealing with the safety of the community, when you're dealing with a construction project, you need to follow applicable permitting and licensed contractors to do the work, in my opinion. I'm sure the public safety, or our Department of Public Works, are very competent in what they do, but it's not fair to ask them to work outside of their expertise, and I don't think that they are pouring a lot of foundations for self-sustaining towers. So, okay, and I'll say it at that. I would also press on, they mentioned, they spent probably 10 minutes talking about the coverage in town, okay, and they talked about how they arrived at that coverage. If I were in your chair, I would be pressing them more on the details of that. The impression I got, they didn't talk about what kind of tool that they used to determine this. And I'm sure partially he was trying to speak to his audience of lay people, but I want to make sure that they actually are doing a coverage analysis that is professional and complete.
It seemed to be modeling.
Which is normal.
Okay.
Okay?
I didn't have that, I couldn't find my book. I had different pages that I had photocopied, but do you have a copy of what they gave us that night?
I haven't, yeah, you mean this one?
Yeah, I
Oh, awesome.
have an emailed copy.
I already see.
Yeah,
what I need
which
to
is
see.
better.
May I?
Yeah.
Okay. This I saw him flip it through, and you were speaking
Yeah,
my
but
language.
there's one with the yellow.
Yeah, it's lovingly known as a blob map.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a topographical map. It doesn't
So
tell me.
completely.
Here we go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, this was clearly done with a legitimate computer model. So
Okay.
this addresses one of my concerns. I would like to know what these colors actually mean rather than good, fair, and below average.
Right.
For me to make an assessment of that, I would need a signal strength. But looking at this, if they're using a similar threshold to what I'm used to, it looks like a good portion of the town is adequately served by these two towers.
I found for me, the most interesting part I found about the presentation was that we were currently, I'm going to say, like 50 or 60% covered, and just fixing our antennas took us from wherever we were to 85% covered, and then adding that third tower for all that other stuff took us from like 85 to 89% covered. Like it wasn't a huge improvement.
So, outline of Berlin, right? And then you have, this is coverage with engineered antenna and filtering, which is essentially fixing the antennas that are broken and taking some of the duplexing, the guts of the system and upgrading it, which is what they asked for, is like their second phase of this. So what you're looking at is across Berlin, they're by their own thresholds, most of the town is considered good coverage, and the rest is basically fair coverage with a few isolated spots. I am not qualified to say how this would necessarily affect their operations. If one of these particular dead spots is, I don't know, someplace that gets a lot of public safety calls, then that's a big deal, right?
Problem, yeah.
But if you are attempting to fill a small dead spot, you should use a solution that is proportional to the need, rather than putting up something that is going to cover a lot of area, and it would make it great.
Yeah.
No deniability about it. But anybody can be a great engineer on an unlimited budget, and I would see if there are potentially more isolated or more appropriate uses to fix. Yes, this is yours. I'm a member of
No,
the public,
this is-
remember?
Now, what do you suggest? What should we do?
Speaking personally,
Yes,
I was very happy to hear that the repairs were being affected.
yeah,
I think that if I had my way as an individual, and I said, I think you need to get public safety operational. That is a priority.
right,
Okay.
yeah.
Affecting the changes that the vendor suggested of fixing the antennas, sweeping the lines, putting the proper antennas in place, potentially changing their height, which one point I didn't mention, but I mentioned in my letter, is vertical real estate in a tower is a valuable commodity, and you pay for it.
Right.
And there's a whole other section I need to talk about that too. But do that. The second phase, talking about the filters and the duplexers and the various pieces of the equipment that combine the RF signals, that is also a worthwhile investment. And for goodness sake, please get this equipment into appropriate shelters of some sort that is controlled. One of the things that was brought up is that we're currently occupying effectively, I don't want to say abandoned, but Sprint chose, I believe it was Sprint, if I'm disparaging them, sorry, but chose to put inside their shelter a cabinetized system which has its own climate control. And then they left the shelter itself to not run climate control, which has left the town of Berlin to fend for ourselves in what amounts to a hot shelter. The physical reality of that is that means that telecommunications provider is dumping the heat from their system into a closed room and
Yeah.
affecting
Which is no.
Berlin's operation. I would see what our rights are under the zoning decision that was rendered to allow Sprint to do there. They did not give this space to the town of Berlin out of the goodness of their heart. They were probably compelled for reasons to this. We need to understand what the rights of the town are in that situation. It seems, as a citizen, I was a little bit irritated that was done because they made a cost-saving decision, which I don't disagree with, but it had a negative consequence to us, and therefore we should have some kind of say on that being done.
If we upgrade the antennas, or when we upgrade the
Yep.
antennas, we have to go back to the owners, I would assume? I don't think you can just go in and,
I'm going to say yes. And here's the reason why I'm saying yes. Tower companies, whoever is the owner of that tower, wants to know what's on their real estate. They want to know how much it weighs. They want to know the wind loading. They want to know whether you are in a space that you're supposed to be. Because one of their businesses, whether it's a telecommunications carrier or someone like an American Tower or I'm blanking on the other ones, they resell this property to others who may want to use it. So if you're taking up two spots, they want to know about it because they want to charge you for it. If you're in a spot you're not supposed to be and somebody comes to them and says, I'd like to pay you $3,000 a month to go here, and oh, by the way, the town of Berlin's in my spot, what are you going to do about it? those things. So
No problem, so.
they're going to want to know an accurate tower inventory of what's there, where it's at, what it weighs, what exactly it is. As a telecommunications person, I want to know what you're transmitting, because if I have problems, the telecommunications carrier, is a licensed entity. I have the right to transmit on this block of spectrum. If you are transmitting on your block of spectrum and you are interfering with me, the telecommunications carrier has a right to make you stop. So one of the ways that that everybody plays nice together is information exchange. And they talked about this a little bit in the meeting. They mentioned horizontal separation of antennas versus vertical separation antennas.
Why would they then add discs?
I'll get that in a second. So horizontal, we have less isolation between the antennas than if you do vertically. Okay. Why do you want to use dish? Think of a flashlight. Okay. If you have a light bulb sitting on this table, it's shining in all directions, up, down, sideways.
It's just flooding light.
Correct. That's what's known as an omnidirectional antenna, which is what the town of Berlin, I believe, is using based on what was described to me. They're sticks. Stick antennas is the shorthand for them. A dish, parabolic, any form of that, would take that light bulb and it would focus it similar to what a reflector would do on a flashlight, and directs it in a particular area. You still have the same amount of energy, for example, but it'll appear brighter because it is concentrated and is pointed in all in one direction. So that's, and specifically, I would be surprised if they were using that kind of antenna for the actual connection between the tower and the patrol officer's radio on their side. What they would use that for is more a point-to-point communication, the microwave that they talked about, or establishing a link between the two towers, for example. That would be an appropriate use for that kind of thing. Or, never mind, I'm babbling.
No, I got a call and I referred them to the building inspector, but they wanted to put dishes up on Coburn Road.
Okay. One of the consequences of using dishes is, I mentioned earlier that structurally they have a wind loading associated with them. If you can experience this yourself, if you ever put your hand out of the window of a car and you're going 40 miles an hour, you don't really feel much when you're like this, but you feel a whole lot when you're like this. It's the same concept for a dish. So one of the things it's appropriate to go to the building inspector for is because they would ask, well, does this amount of force put it over what's allowable for this particular tower? Probably not, but they have to check because it's their job. Towers in New England.
No, it was to go on the building.
Oh, a building? Well, that is not such a big deal, other than visually. But towers in New England are rated for, oh gosh, I've been out of this too long, but think on the order of tropical storm winds and a whole lot of ice on the tower. Okay, so
At the same time.
At the same time. They are designed not to come down. That's the whole point.
That'd be bad.
It happens.
It'd still be bad.
And it is bad. What else? I feel like I've been talking a blue streak for an hour, so I'm going to shut up and answer questions.
So communication between the towers, we can have coaxial cable or fiber or microwave link, yeah.
Or even wireless potentially.
Do they ever mix them up?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know that. Outside of in my line of work, we use fiber exclusively.
Yeah.
But we're also a commercial grade network, so you choose what's appropriate to your use.
What you get, what you pay for.
Yep. I mean, a telecommunications carrier like AT&T is carrying thousands and thousands of calls a day in a town like Berlin, tens and tens of thousands in larger communities, so we need a little more infrastructure.
Okay. Are all your answers, all your questions answered?
Not all my questions, but questions pertaining to this, yes.
So I don't know what else I can offer. I'm happy to meet with whomever, but I just thought it was appropriate to at least offer my expertise to you, having seen and Eloise, of course, asking me to do so meant a lot. But I think that to summarize what we have here, this is a complex, expensive project. I think it equates to somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 or 6% of the annual expenditure of Berlin. So I think that we deserve, as a community, as well as the public safety chiefs, deserve the ability and the time to research this appropriately and to get the best possible network they can for their dollars. And I don't want to see them look at the first potential solution that's offered to them. I was happy to see that multiple quotes would be required, and I would like to see them tease out all the possible solutions that could work, still provide a high level of reliability appropriate to the needs of Berlin, with the uses that Berlin Public Safety and Department of Public Works would actually use. I don't really think we need to gold plate. I'm not suggesting that we are, but questions need to be asked of, okay, what is this system capable of versus the actual needs of the customers? If it is capable of far more than is necessary, well, then I have to ask, why are you doing that? What about future operations are necessary for you to do that?
Right.
And there should be a good reason for that, and it's probably an entirely logical one and acceptable. I just don't know it, and at this point, not knowing it makes me wonder, well, why don't I know it?
Do they typically do some of these projects in phases?
Yes, and here's the qualification. Berlin's system has degraded a lot.
Yeah.
So I appreciate what the chiefs are saying, that they've reached the point of maybe criticality. But and I saw your comment about the forum. I know that the charter of this particular board is looking 5 years out. So I think it's appropriate when coming to this board that you see a long-term plan associated with it. It may simply be that we cannot wait any longer, and this is a must-do.
No, I realize that, but we wanted to make sure that stuff we were doing now would not have to be redone in 3 or 4 years.
That's fair. Eloise, you and I have talked about this before. We often do a really good job with new procurement, but a poorer job maintaining what we have.
We have a terrible, they love new and shiny, and they hate maintenance.
So I've spent my professional career maintaining networks and fixing them and detecting when they break. So I have a clear bias here towards maintenance, operational support, and that kind of thing. So I would want to see attached to any allocation of funds. And if this came to town meeting, I would stand up as a citizen and ask for this very same thing. What is the long-term plan to maintain this significant investment that is being made by the community? And I know some of it is coming from grants, and some, but ultimately it's all coming from the community in some way, shape, or form. And if there's not a reasonable, logical, and complete plan to care for this system across its lifetime, and oh, by the way, you should be planning in advance for its ultimate obsolescence and replacement, long before it gets to the point of not being operational anymore. I think that's reasonable, and I think it's fair for us to ask. Us meaning the town of Berlin.
Well, thank you again.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, at this point in time, we don't have any, I'm going to say, anything to debate about, fortunately or unfortunately. As you know, we approved the antennas, and I invited Chief to be here tonight. And I spoke to him about the antennas. Not last week, the week before, he said he had just gotten in his third bid. So they are moving forward with
So
that
they're fixing
antenna
them. Okay.
replacement.
Good.
I'm super curious to see what that does for our coverage and to just start there.
How about fixing the cooling? Some fans were hanging out, and those cabinets have to be
And the batteries.
repaired.
And the batteries, and
Okay.
then maintenance. I mean, I did ask him in that meeting, and I don't remember now what he said.
Yeah,
But it was something like their maintenance program that the new guy was proposing was $4,000 a year, and I said, well, what are we paying for maintenance now? And he said, oh, we're paying like $3,500 for maintenance now. So, but
Yeah.
clearly we're not getting maintenance.
Yeah, well, we can't. Sorry, we can't litigate the sins of the past.
Right.
It's not fair to the current application, but it is relevant to say your past affects what we think you're going to do in the future.
Right.
Right.
So if this vendor is going to provide one service visit, which I recall from the meeting, per year, okay. Personally, I would like to see it more frequent than that, but I understand that this is what they're offering to us. It's better than nothing,
Yeah.
which is clearly what we've been getting for a few years here. What does that service call entail? So that got back to the stabilization fund comment I made in my email to you. So say the vendor comes out, they do their annual inspection and certification if necessary, and they say, well, Town of Berlin, you need to fix this. This is what I found in my inspection, which is what a professional will do.
Mm-hmm.
They will also give you an idea of what to expect in the future. This is passable today, but it's degrading. It should be addressed, maybe not this year, but definitely by next year.
It's got a life of X.
Yeah, there's a service life associated with this. Things happen. Storms happen.
Right.
What happens if we get the inevitable knockout punch from Mother Nature, where an antenna gets blown hard, knocked horizontal? I have seen this in my professional life where I've had antennas pointing at the ground. Okay, now
That's unfortunate.
it is very unfortunate. Now you're looking at a tower climb, which is a highly skilled professional that
It's terrifying. I
w-
couldn't imagine.
goes up, I don't know what the height on these are, but say 80 feet. It's still plenty to kill you. And they have to go up there and they have to right the antenna. That can run a fair amount of money. I don't know what under this service contract would be, but it's in the thousands, not the hundreds. Anyway, so do we have a plan for that? It's going to happen. Something bad is going to happen. And when you start factoring in the fiber loop that's running through different parts of town, you're just
Adding to
increasing
the-
your odds of something bad happening. The more complex the network is, the more likely something's going to go wrong. And same thing with the fiber loop. Who's maintaining the electronic side of that? Is the radio team also have the expertise to handle a fiber loop? What happens?
I have no idea.
What happens when, some of the equipment necessary to power that fiber loop goes bad? Or are we maintaining software on them? Are we maintaining security on them to keep it? One of the things they're talking about is keeping our communications secure. So you got to make sure that you keep up with your patches, and you got to keep up with all the things associated with that. So those are all aspects to the maintenance of a system like this that you got to have nailed down, and you got to understand. And the vendor say, I will do.
Would those different parts be all in one group or one contract, or are you talking different contracts for different portions of it?
It depends on the capabilities of the vendor that's selected. If you hired someone like General Dynamics, you're good. They can do pretty much anything from building a nuclear submarine to maintaining our fiber network. But if you're doing a small scale, privately held enterprise that maybe specializes in one piece, no, they would have a sub and another sub and another sub, and they're
That's not
functioning,
good.
which
My understanding from our meeting was that that vendor who presented was not presenting about the fiber loop. He was talking about attaching his stuff to an installed fiber loop.
Yeah,
So
that was
my
my
understanding
impression,
was that it was not his, that was coming from somewhere else.
So the question then becomes, who is that person?
Yeah.
Who's
Right.
that entity that would be installing, caring for, and is that covered under the maintenance contract? Is that a separate contract? One of the things I saw in the documentation you provided to me, Eloise, from previous meeting, was they were talking about doing drops to other community buildings. I think the 1812,
The 1870 town hall and the
1870.
library and the highway barn.
Okay, so a logical question is, okay, cool. What are you
Why?
gonna use them for?
Yeah.
Right.
Are you going to be passing information? Is there a need to pass a great deal of information between the 1870 town hall, the highway barn, and the library? Because you can't hit the internet from this. It's a private network. It's designed to connect point A to point B. It's not, unless they order something that I don't understand. But essentially, what you're doing is you're stringing a line of glass, you're lighting it up, and you're passing signals across it, and it's only as good as what you connect to it. So I guess if you put a internet lead into this, you could pass it through there, but that's not what it's for. It's for connecting the towers together. It was connecting to the dispatch center, to connecting back to Neshoba Valley Regional Dispatch. You're not going to be putting YouTube on that.
I don't have a TV, don't look at me.
That's the question. I'm maintaining eye contact.
I know, I feel guilty.
Now, why would library need to be connected to this system?
If the thought was that we're going to bring high-speed internet and services to the library, cool. I'm all about that.
But that's different.
But I don't think that
It's not
that's
on
what
that
it's
loop.
going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would like to see some confirmation that that is in fact what we will be getting.
Yeah.
Yeah. My understanding was it was all for fire and police.
Fire
So-
and police, basically.
Well, and then there's the question of, okay, do you really want to mix that traffic together? Do you want to mix communications that is critical to public safety and DPW with, what happens if, say we get it so that this traffic is being passed from the library and it's publicly available. Say some kid decides to download a massive file
I know.
or stream a bunch of high definition video or something like that and takes up 80% of the resources of the system. They mentioned quality of service. I was happy to hear that because that's important, but you got to protect. It's something called the guaranteed bit rate through this pipe. And in my opinion, all of it should be guaranteed bit rate to public safety and the DPW, and anything else is kind of
Right.
best effort.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I didn't understand that at all. I would want to hear from the vendor how they were seeking to accomplish a public good at these other places. with
Now
the
again,
system.
that was the fiber, right, with the
That is
drops.
fiber.
And that, again, my understanding did not come at all from the vendor that talked to us.
Right.
My understanding was that was something fire was working on. The fiber, so like fire was doing fiber optic and police was doing what we saw.
So we have no fiber cables in this town at all?
Correct. That's my understanding.
I thought charter was fiber.
No, they just,
To,
it's
to,
just
to say
backbone
that there's no
comes in.
fiber optics in the town is difficult to say. There could be customers here that have brought in their own fiber. I don't know. What I know there isn't, that you corrected me, right? We don't have a service like FiOS
Right.
in town.
Right.
So I'm parsing language because I don't know what's on the poles out here. Very easily there could be many fiber strings running around there. Whether we have access to them, whether we can actually use them, that's an open question, which is something, because we don't own them.
So AT&T and Verizon, they must have fiber to the antenna poles.
That
Oh, no?
I have to be careful. Yes. So Verizon is what's known as the local exchange carrier
Right.
in this region. AT&T is not. So
Okay.
AT&T would have fiber, but it would be a long distance type of thing, business type of thing. They're in this case, it would be connecting, a business. Say we have a large business, well, BJ's,
Yeah.
back to their home office. That may be something we do, but even then, it's probable that we may be using a competitor's physical infrastructure to do that. We hire them just like they hire us, and we create networks.
Well, the
on each other.
Secretary of State just had Verizon come in and change out the copper wires for election security.
Yeah, well, okay. Disclose new hat. I work for Eloise as the election warden, so this is something that this is something else that we do.
You're a little busy there, Tim.
Yeah. So I don't know how it happened, but anyway,
Meeting me was one of the
Yeah.
it was the worst thing that has ever happened. But yeah, fiber is a lot more secure.
Yeah.
It's harder to disrupt. It's much more modern, and it can carry a boatload more traffic than copper can. So of course, and it's more reliable. As we know from the system, which the chiefs have already talked about, that they have outages and crosstalk and things associated with the copper connections that are running it now. Okay, do I go sit down again?
Yeah, you can stay here. You don't have to move. We're casual.
All right,
Um,
it's your show.
yes, damn it.
This is why I like to get reports earlier. It gives me time to think about them.
Yeah.
It's hard when they're doing it that night, and then they say, oh, and make a decision.
Right.
That was a lot of information.
Yes.
That was a lot of information, and
Yeah, but it's not stuff that we work with on a day-to-day basis, so.
right. And so part of me speaking with you tonight was actually I got clearance to do so from AT&T and to make sure there's no conflict of interest or anything like that. So I went through our ethics department and talked to our lawyers and all this good stuff. And the reason, even then, you saw the email. I had a line of questions that I scribbled on my iPad here that it was so fast. And obviously I was watching YouTube, so I couldn't ask the question real time, but I didn't understand this. What do they mean by that? I need more clarification on this, and this is what I do, right?
Right.
So I could pick up the buzzwords. I could jump to a lot
You
of
understand
conclusions.
the lingo.
Yeah,
Right.
and it was. I can completely understand where that could have been difficult for you guys not living in that world.
Is this where I point out that we have an empty seat on capital planning, and if you wanted to add another hat to your busy time with Eloise, you're welcome to talk.
It really depends on how often you meet.
Not very often,
Yeah, it depends on the time of
Usually,
year.
we're going into our slow season, which is maybe once a month, maybe. And then it starts in earnest in November.
And then we're twice a month, November through February. Not through February, November to February.
Yeah.
And then
'cause
we slow down again.
By the end of January, we have to do a report to the selectmen of what we support versus what we don't.
Yeah, and that's probably also factors in around town meeting times, right?
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
here I am on camera.
Yeah, there's no pressure.
You can always just sit in on a meeting if it
Well,
has anything that,
At the very least, I'm more than willing to stay involved in this particular project because
you have
it's
some
something I
knowledge.
have to offer for sure,
Right,
and
right.
Because you asked me.
Even if you didn't come to the meetings, we're all going to start calling you now and being like,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
said this, what question do we ask? He said this, what question
this,
do we ask?
This is a
As an
small town. I
interested
get it.
taxpayer, I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
You're welcome.
So at this point in time, as far as capital planning is concerned, we're sort of sitting back and waiting for the chiefs to come back to us and ask for more money, whatever their next step is. And then we get to
And we
ask them
ask,
lots of questions.
On the projects that we have approved in the past, where are they? Are they going forward? Are they stuck? What's happening?
Which is fair.
Yeah.
Well, the roof,
The roof is one of them, yeah.
the fire station roof. I mean, I think if they're not gonna do something right, you know, put a top on it. They can't put a top on this one, I don't think.
It's flat.
You
So is
know,
fire
because they
station.
also have to,
Is it
the,
really?
the roof has to be done in
Oh, that
conjunction
fire station.
with the air handler.
The old fire station.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna
I was
ask
gonna
you about
say-
that. We
Yeah.
approved money stuff, so money is now waiting for that, or
Yeah, it's in
Well-
its.
money is gone? No.
No. The
No,
money's in
it's-
its.
Now we want
Bucket.
the project to complete.
Right, yeah,
I don't know.
Unfortunately, that's not our.
I know.
We can ask our beloved chairman to ask.
Oh, that's great. Who wants to be chairman next? I have heard that the vault still exists within. Remember, the vault was supposed to go to fire, according to our. Are you guys? You're looking at me like I'm crazy. Okay, let me circle back. Police chief drove a Volt
Chevy
car,
Volt.
Chevy
Oh,
Volt.
yeah.
Talking automobiles.
Yes, I'm sorry. That's why I'm like,
This is-
you guys have
this
no
is an
idea where
art-
I'm
Yeah, yeah.
starting.
No, this is energy committee now. I can actually put on my hat.
So the police chief was driving a Volt. He wanted to drive the retiring pickup truck.
Yeah.
So we approved that with the Volt going to fire, so that the fire inspector could drive the Volt.
Who
Yeah.
just retired.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do we have a new fire inspector, or we just wait? Okay.
I only work here.
So the Volt was supposed to go to fire and replace a vehicle that fire had that is inoperable, and now I don't remember what vehicle that was supposed to be.
Pickup truck that's all rusted or something. I don't know.
We replaced that with the new pickup truck,
Yes, we
right?
did, yeah.
So that old rusty pickup truck shouldn't be here anymore, right? Okay. So the Volt, however, remains in the police department at the moment. The fire inspector is still driving the brush truck to inspect for fires. So I hear that the select board would not recommend that the Volt move. So I don't know if Energy Committee, I know that the Volt affected our green
Yes, it
green town rating, green
Green community.
thank you. So we had to keep it. Not that I wanted to get rid of it.
How is it
But
that
nobody
I'm getting an
wants it,
action
so-
item?
An action item?
Yeah, the energy committee. I haven't even been sworn in yet.
This is just capital planning. We're talking about the
Okay.
projects we were supposed to be on top of. Okay.
I had no idea this was happening.
Okay. Okay, I'll follow up.
Did they buy the new fire truck and
No, I
SUV,
thought they were getting
SUV
a
for the
car.
chief? No.
Yeah, I didn't think they were getting a fire truck. I thought they were just getting a vehicle.
They're getting the Tahoe
Just
thing.
the Tahoe.
And I don't know. I haven't seen Chief Clark in
I
months.
saw him today, but
You didn't
ballots
check out what he
came
was
in
driving?
today. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah, no, I saw Shartner last week or the week
Okay.
before. Chief Shartner, not to degrade him. So, and he told me, so we got a new cruiser, so now we have 6 vehicles on the police tally.
I think that's plenty for a small town like that. But
Well, they can
Or
use
7.
the Volt then when they have to go over to court.
So, yeah, so I actually didn't think, so Shartner said they're using it, he had a name for it and I have forgotten, Chief Shartner, I'm sorry, had a name for it and I have forgotten. But I thought they were using it in a very sort of appropriate way. Apparently, they have, this is totally me paraphrasing because, like, speaking in electrical terms, I don't use his language. So he he had terms that I converted into terms I understood. So we have officers that we send to school. And those schools are Randolph and Springfield, maybe. They're very far away. And so we were sending them in cruisers, and now we're sending them in the Volt. So we're saving a lot of money and time on cruisers by having the Volt and using it that way.
Okay.
So I don't think
That's
it's
fine.
inappropriate. It just didn't get shifted as we had asked.
Well, the fiscal year isn't over.
Yeah.
You gotta wait till next June 30 to,
To ask again.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions for Tim? Any more
No.
comments, thoughts? Okay.
But if we get more information, I will forward it to you, just,
You know, call me back.
Yeah.
okay.
It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll have lots of questions if this comes
It's fine.
up again, for sure.
It's fine.
Yeah.
If
That's,
whatever role that you think is appropriate for me, I'm willing to do it.
thank you.
Translator.
That too.
Yeah, right.
I can do that too.
So I'm going to adjourn us at 8:13 on Thursday the 28th. Thank you guys all for attending,
Okay.
so that we can better understand electrical equipment.